Good morning and welcome again to the East Mediterranean Forum. My co-host is Marta Muzhańska, and with us is Mr. Gary Lakes, Director of the Energy Program at the European Rim Policy and Investment Council. Gary, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, good morning.
Gary, we were hoping you could give us an update on the latest regional developments on the energy front.
All right. I think the thing to do at this point is to talk about what might happen in 2017. There have been some developments in Egypt, which are good, and they point towards an improvement in the whole situation in the East Med. The biggie was, of course, the Zohr discovery in August 2015, which was made by Eni, the Italian company, and they are going full out to develop that field in 2017. I think it'll come on with like 1 billion cubic feet. That'll happen by the end of this year. Hopefully, also BP is involved with developing one of their fields there. They'll come on with about the same capacity sometime during 2017. And so there's a lot of work going on in Egypt. That's basically because there have been some changes in the way that the Egyptian government has approached its its energy problem, and so things are looking up there. In Cyprus, things are going to take some sort of shape. We don't know what yet. There's been rumors of a commercial agreement to send Aphrodite gas to Egypt to have it liquefied at the Idku facility, which is basically idle right now because the Egyptians simply can't supply the gas that it needs for to process the LNG. And so there's been, I think maybe there's been some recent effort to try to get that back on track, but it's like one cargo a month maybe, from what I've seen, and so there's also the bidding round, which the government is expected to name preferred bidders in the next week. They said, early in 2017. I've heard maybe it could come a little earlier than that, but that will be for the blocks 6, 8, and 10. And participating in that is Eni and Total and Statoil and Exxon Mobil and Qatar Petroleum. And that should be quite an interesting outcome to see who they select and how it proceeds from there. There's, of course, the pending drilling in Block 11 by Total. They have been stalled because they are unable to arrange a logistics base at a Cypriot port. Larnaca was used initially in the early days of when there was some drilling offshore Cyprus, but that has been now it's been shifted to, I think, what a tourist development, and so Total was wound up making an agreement with EDT, a service company in Limassol, and the day after they signed the agreement and were getting ready to take further steps towards the drilling, it was discovered that the privatization of Limassol port, which included BP World, sort of excluded all other sort of operations in the port, and it meant that the contract that EDT and Total had signed was somewhat in question. So now there's an effort underway to resolve that, and hopefully it will be resolved soon, and Total can start drilling. They had originally planned to start drilling in April 2017. Clearly, that's going to face a delay now. They actually, if their original plan had worked, they had planned to work out of Larnaca, and they would have started drilling in last September. So it's unfortunate delays, and it's sometimes difficult, to try to understand, why the Cypriot government isn't a little better prepared to deal with something like this. When you consider that there's so much emphasis placed on turning Cyprus into an East Mediterranean gas hub, and these discussions that have gone on for years now, really. A thing like not having a logistics base for drilling, is leaves a lot of things in question. There's also in Israel. Israel recently announced a licensing round for 24 offshore blocks, and that's due to close in March, and they plan to, I think, announce preferred bidders shortly after that, during the first half of next year, which will mean that the Israeli offshores should open up considerably. So far, it's just been Noble Energy of the U.S. and Delek that's really made any significant discoveries there. Other companies have drilled a couple wells, but they haven't really come up with anything, and they haven't been really major outfits. So hopefully, this Israeli round will bring in some big companies. Mentioning Noble and Delek, I might go back to the Cyprus offshore and mention that Noble and Delek, Noble in particular, discovered the Aphrodite field in December 2011, and that reserve is put at like 4.5 trillion cubic feet of gas. But that's the commercial deal that may happen with Egypt. So we'll be waiting on that. In the meantime, go back to the Israeli field, Leviathan gas field. That's probably going to get a final investment decision early next year. It's been delayed by a number of things going on in Israel, and it's been, I guess, somewhat frustrating for Noble. But if they're signing contracts with different companies, and one in particular to the Jordanian electrical company for the sale of gas, and so based on those things, hopefully the Leviathan will get the go-ahead soon for early 2017. I know Delek has arranged loans. I don't know exactly where Noble is regarding its financial arrangements for its share of development, but Leviathan's 22 trillion cubic feet, and it's a lot of gas. And I guess Israel's finally pretty keen to get that moving. I mean, of course, the impetus for all of this was the Zohr discovery in 2015. That got everybody excited. That's what launched the new Cypriot licensing round. That's the island's third round. And now with the regulatory issues in Israel solved, the government has launched a round there. So an interesting development has been the fact that Lebanon seems to be getting back on track somewhat. The parliament managed to elect a president about a month ago, Michel Aoun. He's a former head of the military, and I think he was prime minister back in the 90s, at the very closing days of the Lebanese Civil War. He's now about in his 80s, I think, and was elected president. It just so happens that his Christian political party has the support of the Shia Muslim Hezbollah. So it's Lebanese politics. So it's complicated. In the meantime, Assad Hariri, who's the son of the assassinated Rafik Hariri, is in the process of trying to put together a government. Now, Lebanon's situation was complicated by the fact that they started a licensing round in 2013. They started with a pre-qualification round, and then went on to name the companies that pre-qualified and were allowed to bid. But these companies couldn't bid because there were two decrees that the government needed to pass in order for the licensing round to actually be able to close. So, I mean, they couldn't place any bids because the round couldn't close. So those decrees pertain to the model agreement that would be used to negotiate contracts, and also the demarcation of the blocks, the delimitation of the blocks. And there are 10 blocks that the Lebanese Petroleum Authority has identified offshore Lebanon, and Lebanon has had a lot of seismic work done. Most of the area offshore Lebanon has some sort of seismic data available on it. And according to the company that's done it, I think Spectrum is most of it. There's some very attractive and prospective sites there. So, the fact that this has been on hold since 2013, I mean, it says that, that Lebanese politics is very, very cumbersome, and it's been very difficult. And hopefully they will resolve that soon. They'll reform a government, they'll pass the decrees, and the licensing round for Lebanon will get back on track. So, and also, I mean, since we're in Lebanon, there is a disputed area between Lebanon and Israel. It's 854 square kilometers. It's like a little wedge going out into the sea. I don't know how that's going to play out. The Americans have tried to negotiate some sort of a deal between the two. I don't think either side has been very cooperative, but of course it is Lebanon and Israel, and technically they're still in a state of war. So the other issue, I think, is perhaps all the about monetizing the CSMED stuff. And all of this is still rather theoretical, okay? So, but there's a lot of speculation about a pipeline from Leviathan to Turkey. And I guess this is coming because after quite a few years, I think it's about 5 years or so, the Israelis and the Turks have reaching a rapprochement, I guess you could say, and I think they're exchanging ambassadors now, and things are sort of back to normal. But for a while there, things got very bad. And just reading in the press today, I mean, there's a lot of statements coming from Turkish President Erdogan that are still rather negative about Israel. So the talk about a pipeline to Turkey, I don't know. I don't think that the companies involved, again, Noble and Delek, although they're keen to do business, have a great deal of faith in this project. We'll have to see. We just have to see on that one. Like all of them, there are experts who claim that this is the best best way to monetize East Med gas is to ship it through Turkey. I mean, personally, I don't really agree with that, and I think that there are a lot of options, and I think it seems to me that there are a lot of other people and other business people who don't really agree with that either. I mean, I was at a conference last week where the representative from Eni was speaking, and he was saying, well, let's see how much gas we got, and then we can look at what options there are to monetize gas in East Med. And this was an Eni representative, and as some of you may know, Eni was drilling in Block 9 in 2014, and it had a 4-well drilling program. It drilled two dry holes and stopped and said, okay, we're going to recalibrate our seismic and take another look at this. And so, that was suspended. The drilling program was suspended. And then, they went off, and a year later, they discovered Zohr, which is like 30 trillion cubic feet. And they found it in a carbonite buildup, which is different geology from where they have been finding gas. The gas that's been discovered so far, like Leviathan and Aphrodite, in sandstone, to my understanding. And so Eni is planning to come back and start drilling again in the Cypriot waters in the second half of 2017. And depending on how the bidding round goes, because I think they've bid on 6 with Total, and on 10 with Total, and I think they bid on 8 by themselves. So there's a chance they could come back in a big way, depending on if they're awarded more blocks. This is going to be interesting because ExxonMobil in Qatar, who I mean, they run a big LNG operation in Qatar. It'd be interesting to see if they get Block 10 and how they proceed with that. But again, it's all speculation. The one thing that's still banging on, and we'll see. I mean, it'll be many years from now, is this East Med gas pipeline, which is sponsored by Italy and Greece. And it's called IGI Poseidon, I believe is the name of the joint venture they formed. And they want to build an underwater pipeline from Leviathan to Cyprus, then to Crete, and then onto the Greek mainland, and over the Greek mainland, and on into Italy. And so I think they're planning to have a pipeline about 16 billion cubic meters a year, and it would require quite a lot of gas. So, I mean, the whole situation here in the East Med is that there has to be a lot more drilling. There have been some very, exciting discoveries, especially with Leviathan and Zor, and there's, but it is like the gentleman from NE said. I mean, there needs to be a lot more drilling done. And then take a look at what the resources are and where they're located, if they're large, small, how you can find the synergies to put them all together. But I mean, it really is the key. So you got to have what's really got to happen here, especially in Cyprus, is more drilling. Before you get more drilling, you've got to have a logistics base to work from. It would be beneficial to the island. I mean, it could serve as a service center for the entire region. It's a great place to work out of, provided you do have a place to work out of. So that's something the government really has to bear in mind. It really must act on quickly. So, I mean, apart from that, I think that's basically where the East Med is for the time being.
Gary, on your last point, apparently Noble has decided to move its place of operations out of Cyprus, and Eni is thinking about it. Total, as you mentioned, for the time being is still able to conduct its business out of one of the Cyprus ports, but I mean, it seems that things don't look good for Cyprus as an operating base.
It's kind of ridiculous. I heard that Noble would shift out to Haifa, and that he would operate out of Port Said. And it's just it kind of boggles the mind, really, because here we are. Since 2011, at least, Cyprus has been talking about being an East Med energy hub and a service center and the rest of it. And I mean, what can you say? They can't provide the facilities for these companies to work out of. And I mean, I'm at a loss for words.
What do you think the problem is? I mean, is it political? Is it because technical issues can be bridged and overcome? But if there's a political will, that is.
Well, it's been political initially. I mean, the situation with Larnaca was really unfortunate. That, I mean, essentially the government turned over to the Larnaca municipality a very serious decision about the country's hydrocarbon policy. As simple as that. And why, and it seems as if it was for strictly political reasons. And you just can't operate like that. The government has to really make a decision. I mean, does it want a hydrocarbon industry here or not? And I can appreciate the fact that the talks with the Turkish Cypriots are extremely important. But at this stage, I mean, there's the other problem of the energy sector needs to have drilling work. That's the only way that it's ever going to live up to being any sort of an energy center, is whether to know whether or not there are gas resources out there apart from 4.5 TCF in Aphrodite. Now the thing is, I mean, there's only been 4 wells drilled offshore Cyprus. So, I mean, you know, there was Aphrodite discovery, there was the Aphrodite appraisal, which actually resulted in the initial volume of gas they thought they discovered actually being taken down to 4.5. I think it was 5.8 originally when they first discovered the well. And then there were the 2 dry holes in Block 9. And so, you know, and there hasn't been any drilling since I think was it August 2014. So, you know, it's time to get the show on the road here. I mean, there are branches of government that can deal with this. There's, of course, the Ministry of Energy, and then there's the Ministry of I think it's Transport that's dealing with this ports issue. And you know, they're just going to have to make a commitment on this and get it rolling. So I don't know. Yeah. See, I mean, that's what happens. I mean, if you can't provide the facilities, Noble will go someplace else, and then Eni will go someplace else, and then where's Exxon? What if Exxon or Statoil? I mean, they get contracts here. You know, I mean, where are they going to work out? You know, I think that these are really heavy-duty companies. I mean, you know, you don't have time to play around with this sort of stuff. So, you know, it's time to get pretty serious, really serious about this, and move it on. Otherwise, you know, we just let it drag and drag.
Gary, another question, unrelated in some ways. I mean, the conspicuous absence of Russia or Russian companies in the region. I mean, what's your take? Are they concentrating on potentially going to Syria, or you know, or they're not interested in the Eastern Med?
I don't know about that one. I don't. You know, Russia's always been very involved with Cyprus, but I don't know what that's all about. It may have something to do with relationship with Turkey. I don't know. I think Syria is a long shot. We'll have to see how things play out with the Israeli drilling round. They may have been there. I don't know. That may be some indication as to what they plan to do in the future. If Lebanon the licensing round should open, or you know.
Did they show any interest for Lebanon already?
Pardon me?
Did the Russian companies indicate an interest for Lebanon?
I don't know. I haven't seen any, but you know, all things are possible. I mean, it's just such a very early time. You know that for all of these, everything's been sort of hanging midair for quite a long time, and I'm hopefully 2017 will, you know, settle things. Things will begin to gel a little.
Speaking about Russia and Turkey, have there been any developments regarding the Turkish stream, maybe?
Well, I guess it's on the planning board. You know, they seem to be wanting to move forward with that. I think that initially there's going to be one pipeline that will basically supply Turkey. If there's a second string to that pipeline system, that will be directed toward the Greek border. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I think the Russians want the European contractors to shift their connections out of Ukraine and then to this Turk Stream thing, but you know, it's whether the Europeans are going to be crazy about that or not. I'm not sure. So you know, it's there's always you know, there's a lot of plans. Some of them work, some of them don't. You know, it's just a matter of time telling, I guess.
I'd like to ask you about Iran. I mean, a year and a half after the Iran deal, Iran is in the process of being accepted back into the international community. What role could it play in the energy market in the future? And what effect could it have on the Eastern Mediterranean, possibly?
I think Iran's got 3 LNG projects that have been stalled because of the sanctions, and I think that if this deal, if the Iranian agreement holds and foreign investment comes back in, I mean, you'll begin to see those things come back. They were very keen to develop the South Pars field, which is basically their half of the North Field that Qatar draws its gas from and its LNG from. So it's a very real possibility. I don't know what the LNG market. It's interesting, and now with I don't know if it's going to be complicated by the fact that OPEC has at least agreed to some sort of cut in production yesterday, the day before. We'll see. Personally, I don't think the price of oil is going to go way high, because I think you're going to have producers in North America coming back. Once the price hits a certain level, it's going to be very profitable for them to start producing again. But I don't know how it. Again, with the East Med and if there's enough gas there, there could be prospects for more LNG coming out of the East Med. There are. There's the plan to send Aphrodite gas to Idku, and there's also a plan to send Leviathan gas to Idku. And I get the impression that Eni is, thinking of Eni holds a share in the Damietta plant with Spain's Union Fenosa, and that's idle. And so. I get the impression that Eni is looking at that as a possibility to ship LNG, and I think both. I think it's kind of focused on Europe.
But the development will depend on the prices, right? On world prices. So, what's a benchmark price that sort of below which there's no development or limited development? Is there some?
Well,
some level.
I'm not. Right now, the price of LNG is down, as far as I understand, maybe $5 or something. But there's a lot coming on in the U.S. There's going to be a lot, and then Australia, and there's other places around. And I think that what a lot of the producers are doing, those with gas resources, are looking to sort of create markets by setting up floating storage and regasification units. I think that Total has been involved in this in one of the African countries recently, and it's the plan to sort of set up a regasification unit and, of course, a generation system, and where they're creating more or less. I think the idea is to create markets for the LNG, not wait until the market sort of develops on its own, but just sort of to move the production, the LNG production, and to create the markets themselves. The prices, I don't know. I think the gas. I've heard the gas maybe at some point, it will try to establish its own sort of pricing structure that isn't totally, so closely linked with oil. So, it's an evolving situation. We'll see. But I think there's going to be a lot of LNG available at some point, and I think I think in the next decade, that's going to be the way that a lot of energy things are going. And also it's also dependent upon, the agreement, the Paris Agreement about climate change, and if they have taxes on carbon, and what's the also demand for energy, which there's more conservation and more use of renewables. So there's a lot to be seen yet. But as far as the East Med is concerned, I think it could be, there's good opportunities for it, especially in Europe. I think Europe's going to be the target market for, for delivery. And you just got to find out how much gas there is in the East Med, because there's a lot of work to be done yet, and it's at the initial stages. It's all really upstream.
Right.
So,
Gary, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It
Yeah.
was very, very interesting. Thank you.